All right, well, thank you for that. So our first actual speaker that we're going to get into has got some great data. He's the Vice President of Security Research at CSA. They put this NHI study together. They talked to about 800 different organizations. They've got lots and lots of really good information on where we're seeing the problems, where the blind spots lay, how we should address this. I'd like to introduce a good friend of mine, John Yeo. Please come on up and talk through this study.
Okay. Hey, thanks for having me, everybody. Wow, the first NHI Security Conference. I'm pretty pumped about it. Hopefully everybody else is too. Okay, so we're going to talk about some cool things. That's me with my headset on. We're not going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about some of the data that we got from one of the survey reports that we did with Asterix. So before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about why we even did such a thing. And when we look back over the last decade or two, we see a lot of shifts in technologies and how we operate things. And this is a really good representation. This is put together by Momentum Cyber, and they always put together these lists of cybersecurity tools that are offered in the cloud. And this is an example from just 2016. And you can see how things changed. Now, just 7 years later, you need an eye chart just to kind of track all the different kinds of tools that we have. We haven't even begun to introduce non-human identities yet. Many people have, you've seen this whole rush in IoT as far as how many billions of devices that we're using. I have a friend who has 1 billion devices alone in his house. And so it's one of those things where we've seen this huge spike in machines and different kinds of devices that we're using. So this made us think that there's a lot of different ways that we interact with cloud environments. There's a lot of different ways that we interact with IoT devices. And these are credentials, digital credentials or non-human identities that you use to interact with service accounts, to authenticate different kinds of cloud services and IoT devices. And they're even talking to each other. So they're not just interacting with us as humans, but they're interacting with each other. And we have this huge, just complex web of communication that's going on. And that really started us thinking about, hey, you know what else is going to be exponential? It's these identities that we need in order to securely communicate with each other and protect the assets that these digital credentials are speaking to. So in other terms, hey, you know what? Everybody can relate to streaming services. Back in 2007, there are 3 probably that you could find on your smart TV. They didn't even really work that good. Today, this is just from 2021, but today we see probably way too many streaming services. I mean, come on, right? I mean, how many $4.99 subscriptions do you have on your monthly credit card bill? I got plenty of those. And for fun, I actually saw this. So did you know that at Starbucks, you can now get over 383 billion different combinations of coffee products that you can get? Talk about, like complexity with maybe with identity. Maybe that's why Brian Nichols is their new CEO. But just when you think of just how things evolve, I thought this was a fun one just to share, just because I think everybody's had their coffee this morning. I'm not sure what combination you picked, but it gives you an idea of just how things evolve and how complex things get. And so in our IT environments, in our cloud computing environments, we can definitely see how our systems can be super complex. And that kind of got us into discussing with Asterix, hey, what are some of the challenges that we're seeing? We definitely see this proliferation of digital technologies that we talked about. Shadow IT was a big issue that we faced over the years. How do we discover some of the cloud services that we're using? And now there's this prevalence of non-human identities, and there's a list of just some that are up here with API keys, OAuth tokens, service accounts, system account secrets, SSH keys, bots, and the list goes on and on. So this kind of complexity led to the only way to really deal with this is some sort of automation. And so we really wanted to explore together what should be the primary objectives for a survey. And we were looking at understanding the perceptions of security practitioners. What are the real concerns and challenges that we have when we're facing human identities? And what are the current practices that go towards there? So hopefully we can understand a little bit more about today's environment and help organizations that are looking to deal with NHIs at least have a strategy and an approach that they can do that with. So what did we uncover? Another eye chart, perhaps? I'll read through this really carefully. But really, what we found is that a lot of people are struggling with the basics of NHI security. And when I went through this, I was thinking for sure, discovering accounts is going to be the top priority for people because you can't really protect what you don't know. But there are a ton of other things that people were interested in, like auditing and monitoring, accesses and privileges. I think these are all really important to understand. Visibility into third-party OAuth applications. One of the biggest things I think that I took from this too is not only do we need these foundational NHI security components in our environment, but NHIs are different than human identities in a lot of different ways. But the biggest thing that came to mind for me was NHIs are very deterministic. So when we think of humans have patterns, and anomalies can stick out a lot more, right? If we have a human that's logging into a computer in the middle of the night in a different region, these kind of things stand out. But NHIs are very specific with their role, and so deterministic is going to be very specific in how you procure these types of devices, these types of digital credentials. And so the most important thing I think that we came from this is not only do you have to have the fundamentals of NHIs, but you need to recognize that NHIs, anything that's going to be a machine or a non-human, is going to have very specific tendencies. And if they're not procured the right way, if the privileges are set up the correct way, they're going to just, they're going to almost automatically, you're going to have these exposures automatically without even recognizing that. So the ability to procure NHIs, the ability to monitor these things is going to be extremely important so that we can actually reduce that attack surface and protect whatever assets that these credentials are giving you access to. And this kind of, rolls right into this too. So one of the key findings was there was huge challenges with managing permissions. And permissions with API keys, particularly on legacy technology. And so I think there's some people who can handle it a bit better in new environments, but how do you retroactively address these things? This was one of the biggest observations that we saw. And what we recognized too is that organizations need to formalize and automate these API management pieces. And a big part of that came because 90% of organizations have automated processes for onboarding, but that leaves a big chunk, right? We have 4/5 of the industry that isn't really, they're not automating these processes, which gives us, as we talked about how many NHIs are out there. Manual processes, I think we've heard a lot of CISOs in the beginning talking about how they have a team of 10 to 12 people managing their NHIs. And so how do we streamline that with proper tools? I think that's going to be important, how we understand how that works as we come to more conferences like this and understand the challenges with NHIs and how to deal with them. And what we also found is that really led to this. So fragmented approaches that are leading to security incidents. These were some of the top approaches to address NHIs that weren't NHI specific. So if you look at traditional identity management systems, traditional privilege access management systems, and API security, I just mentioned about how deterministic NHIs are, how authorization mechanisms are going to be much different when we look at credential tokens, when we talk about passwords and MFA with human identities. What does that look like with NHIs? So I think that was something that was really important to observe. One thing, too, that came out of this a little bit, too, is we look at NHIs, not only to streamline this, when you have fragmented pieces, not only do you need automation and unified frameworks, but we looked at how could you mirror these privileges, too? So if we're looking at creating privileges for NHIs, can we mirror that? Mirror that as in if this was a human, what would the privileges be? So these are one of the things that we thought that, when you're creating NHI credentialing and privileges, that should mirror the humans that are going to be interacting with those things. So I thought that was a nice observation to understand as we deal with NHIs. And these last things kind of go together. These are, you think it'd be the obvious, but it's always nice to have a little bit of data that supports that. But we know that there's a lot of anxiety and there's not a lot of confidence when dealing with NHIs. In the report that we saw, we have a lot of people are a lot more comfortable with the human identities versus NHIs, and it's not a huge surprise. We talked to a lot of CISOs that, hey, my challenges begin and end with identity. But now that we're looking at NHIs and that huge, expansive part of it, I think that was the big part that brought that about. So yeah, so when we look at understanding how to prevent NHI attacks, we thought that solution awareness is going to be a really important thing, just because there's so many specifics on human identity and how human identity solutions are applied to NHIs. Having solution awareness is going to be really important. And this is the final thing, which kind of leads that, hey, there might be a low confidence, but we do recognize that there is going to be a lot of investment in NHI security. A quarter of the 1,000 people that responded to this are already investing in NHI solutions specific to NHIs. And over the next 6 to 12 months, we see another 60% that are going to be addressing NHI. So there's definitely that trend towards understanding NHI security better and addressing them. And I think the biggest things are, as we talk about building solutions to meet needs, we need to make sure we have a good strategy in place. A good strategy like zero trust or something like that in order to before we build solutions into our ecosystem, we want to make sure we have a good strategy in place for NHIs. So that's a quick summary of the report. And I know I went through that pretty fast, but I wanted to make sure that there's time for some questions. If anybody had any questions on some of the reports that came out here. I know it might be hard to see some of the numbers in the back, but you will get a chance to download the report and check it out for yourself too, if you haven't already. In the back. There's a microphone, or you can just shout it out and I think I can hear you okay too.
Thank you for walking us through this whole NHI. It's a different world altogether. My question is, people talk about secrets management, lifecycle, but no one talks about just-in-time access for these service accounts. So how do you think about it? Because service accounts, they are great, but they can also be a disaster. So any thoughts on just-in-time access?
It's interesting that you say that too, because we talk, like the big thing, at least has been for the last couple of years, is multi-factor authentication for human identities. And how does that apply to non-human identities? And because you can't actually interact with the device. But in cases like that too, we talk about how either certificates are given to certain machines, but then there's also like a one-time password or kind of a JIT element to that. And so that's certainly a big part of it. Lifecycle management is going to play a big role there in the creation and even the reissuing of certain tokens at that point too. So I think those parts will play a role there. But yeah, I think JIT should definitely be something there. Yeah. Hey, Bryce.
Thanks, John. Great stuff. Question, do you have a survey plan for API providers or anybody in the API space, maybe SaaS API space, specifically addressing some of the non-granularity of API roles and the fact that many API providers provide very limited roles and often overprivilege as a result?
Yeah, no, that's we don't have one yet, but this is the first survey of probably, I would think of many, right? We're going to start really addressing the state of NHI security, and then we're going to dive into, what's unique about service accounts, what's unique about the API keys, and dig further into that audience. So one thing we like to do with our surveys is we like to get a general, consensus view of things, and then we'll take anecdotal examples and meet with developers, CISOs, or whoever owns that part of whatever major stakeholders there, so we can get better data. But yeah, this is the first of many. So Bryce, yeah, I expect us to do a lot more with that. All right, okay. One question right here, and then up in the front afterwards. Thank you.
Could you say a little more about the population you surveyed?
Sure.
Large companies, small companies, what business were they in? Were they handling PHI or PII? And also, who did you survey? The IT people only? Because a lot of identity problems are related to business ownership.
Yeah. And the audience is around 900 people, and they are IT focused. We have regions from all over the world. So if you check it out too, you can actually see all the demographics listed there too. So we'll have representation from the Americas region, APAC, and EMEA. And there's also company size there too. I don't have it off the top of my head, what the range in company sizes are. but we'll definitely have SMBs all the way up to the large enterprises participating in these surveys. So, but yeah, that's a good question. And we can dig into that survey and get that information for you. One more question here.
So a CSA type internal audit spreadsheet that somebody could use to see like, where am I? Here's the bar and where do we compare? Has there been an aspect of managing, discovering, and controlling NHI on that internal audit questionnaire that we can use so we can like self-evaluate?
Yeah, NHIs have not been integrated into a CSA framework as of yet. And I think a lot of times these identity controls are even written ambiguously to apply to NHI, but not prescriptive enough for us to really, to be that useful to us. Auditors are probably fine, but to really understand NHIs, I think that's something that's so new in the space, and we know how standards move. And so I think it is important for a community like this and for an organization like CSA to push that out, that kind of stuff out quickly. And that's a good point. I'll make note of that, and maybe in a couple months I can have a better answer for you. Do we have time for any more questions?
I have one question.
All right, perfect.
So whenever I say NHI, the first thing coming to the mind is bots.
Bots.
I don't know, you touched on that, but in case you just want to make sure that that is included part of.
Yeah, I think the range of NHIs, like what's considered NHIs, is pretty large, right? I think we call it anything with a digital credential. And so if we look at if we look at different kinds of bots, if we look at, I'm going to apply it to AI and LLMs because that's such a big thing these days too. These bots are going to have API keys. These bots are going to have service accounts. They're going to be connecting to different systems. They're going to be custom bots. There's going to be, bots that become, LLM agents. And so I think we only expect the NHI field to explode and get out further. I think I've seen some studies that say there's about 20 NHIs to one human identity in an organization. I think that's already lowballing it, and I expect it to be in the hundreds, by the time we come around here next year, if not greater than that. And so there's a lot to handle for NHIs, and I think we're just getting started on it.
Hi, on your survey, were there any organizations that had said they fully solved the NHI problem?
Yeah, no. There was a small percentage that said they're dealing with it and they have a high confidence in it. So we kind of had a scale of how people feel about it. So we're really trying to get our finger on the pulse of how most people feel about NHI security. And the confidence was low, but I will say there were a few people that marked, hey, I feel pretty good about my NHI situation. So yeah, we'll have to ask them. Maybe they're Asterisk customers. I don't know. Any other questions? Okay. I think we have a couple more.
This was great. Thank you so much. I'm curious about quantifying the risk here. How much of a risk is this compared to something like an employee clicking a phishing email or a person's MFA getting exploited? Is NHI security a larger risk than that, or is it the same? How often are we seeing malicious actors take advantage of this compared to the things that we see all the time in the news, like I said, MFA being exploited or somebody clicking a phishing email?
Yeah, I know what's interesting about humans is you can train them, and then I know there's a percentage that just can't be trained. I think we understand that too. But NHIs, I think I mentioned, are very deterministic. You give them privileges and they're going to utilize those. We do have a statistic that, not from CSA report, but 41% of organizations had a security incident from an NHI. So that means something's happening there too. So the risk is high. I think one of the biggest things is that once we understand our environment and where we're vulnerable, we do need to be able to prioritize those, and that's going to be risk based on your organization. And there's going to be hopefully a tool that helps us understand how to prioritize that, because the idea is to expedite how we deal with NHIs, and without some sort of automation and help, it's going to be hard to do that. But yeah, so the risk is definitely prevalent. One more question, and then we got to go.
Finding these things seems really, really tricky. I thought you had a really interesting insight about how the nature of these accounts, whether they're bot accounts or not, are very deterministic. So I'm curious if the technology has been developed to detect bot-like behavior from human accounts, because we all know the easiest way to set something up as a sysadmin is to just type in your own regular account password and then hope no one discovers it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there are a lot of different tools out there. We have, one provider in the room that's solving a big piece of that. But this reminds me of the time where, does everybody remember the cloud access security brokers? I mean, they're still around, but 10 years ago, like literally 10 years ago in 2014, CASB was such a popular term, and it was about the discovery of shadow IT in cloud environments. So what kind of SaaS, is your organization using? Because I think everybody knows that you can just turn on a SaaS, you can purchase a SaaS product with just a credit card, and it skips a lot of procurement that normal IT went through at the time. And so SaaS kind of sat in the middle of your organization, was able to scan and identify different kinds of cloud services that were being used. And similar techniques are being used for NHIs. There's also different ways to discover existing accounts that aren't being used and things like that too. But at this point, I think it's multiple tools that are going to help you discover all your NHIs. And I think in the future, these solutions will get even better, and we'll be able to even probably reduce that down so you have a really good single pane of view for what's in your NHI environment. And I think that's it now. Now we can clap. Let's do it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.